Now, the last type of fatty acid that we're going to discuss is the trans fatty acids. Trans fats are technically a type of unsaturated fats, so we're going to take a look at the unsaturated fat and see how it will technically become a trans fat instead. So over here we have our unsaturated fat. Remember, unsaturated means it's missing some hydrogens and it has a double bond. Now, remember that we said with the unsaturated fats, where they have the double bond, the structure will bend. And so when they try to stack together, there are these gaps that are going to be making it more susceptible to spoilage, because the more the structure is exposed to oxygen, the quicker it'll spoil. So when food manufacturers have this kind of situation where they have unsaturated fats in their product, they know that the extra gaps is going to make their product spoil more quickly. And so they want to fix that situation. Now, if you think about how we would fix the situation, if we work backwards for where that problem came from, the reason that their product is more susceptible to spoilage is because there are gaps causing more oxygen exposure. The reason there are gaps is because there is a double bond causing the structure to bend. The reason there is a double bond is because hydrogens are missing. So if we go back to the source that way, we know that one way that we can eliminate those gaps is by adding hydrogen in, because the whole issue started from hydrogens missing. That created double bonds created the kinks created the gaps. And so if we go back to the source of the problem, it was the fact that there were hydrogens missing. So if we add hydrogens in, we can eliminate some of those double bonds and make it so that there is no need for the structure to bend anymore, and it will look more like a saturated fat, and we can eliminate those gaps that are making the structure more exposed to oxygen. And that's what food manufacturers want. They don't want their product to spoil quickly. They want it to have a long shelf life. And so what a lot of food manufacturers will do is they will add hydrogen in to try to eliminate some of those double bonds, some of those kinks, and make it stack more tightly so that it's not as exposed to oxygen and it can have a longer shelf life. The process that we use to add these hydrogens in is what we call hydrogenation. Now, when we hydrogenate, the end result is what we call a trans fat. So trans fats are unsaturated fats that have been hydrogenated. So let's take a look at what exactly that means. One thing you might have noticed when we looked at the other unsaturated fats up until now, the hydrogens that were missing were always missing on the same side. So for example, the hydrogens that are missing here are both missing from the bottom. There isn't one missing from the bottom and one missing from the top. They're both missing from the bottom. That was the case in all of the pictures of unsaturated fats that we've shown so far, because that tends to be how it occurs in nature. Whenever there is an unsaturated fat, the hydrogens that are missing are always missing on the same side of the chain. Now, what this causes is an imbalance of hydrogens. If we count how many hydrogens we have at the top and the bottom, we have 6 hydrogens at the top and now only 4 hydrogens at the bottom. And that imbalance is what causes the structure to have to bend wherever the double bond is. So again, in normal unsaturated fats, wherever the hydrogens are missing, they will always be missing from the same side. What that causes is an imbalance in the number of hydrogens in the top and bottom, and that imbalance causes the structure to bend at that double bond, at the location where the hydrogens are missing. Now, when we hydrogenate, hydrogenation will fill up some of these gaps, so it'll add hydrogens and eliminate the need for a double bond, but usually it won't fill up all of the gaps. So we'll still have a bunch of other double bonds, and not all of them will get hydrogens to fill up their missing bond requirement. So we will usually still have some double bonds present even after we hydrogenate. But another thing that hydrogenation does is it actually can cause the hydrogens that are present to shift places. So what we see over here. So what this is showing us is a structure that has been hydrogenated. So this is the same structure we were looking at, but instead of both of the hydrogens missing at the bottom, after hydrogenation, remember hydrogenation can also cause the current hydrogens to shift places. And that's what happened. The hydrogen at the top moved to the bottom. So that's the structure we have here. We still have two hydrogens missing, but now one is missing from the top and one is missing from the bottom instead of both of them missing from the bottom. So hydrogenation can also cause the hydrogens to shift places. And what that actually does, if we count the number of hydrogens now, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hydrogens at the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hydrogens at the bottom. So hydrogenation, when it caused the hydrogens to shift places, it actually balanced out our hydrogens again. So even though we still have a double bond, we no longer have that imbalance in hydrogens. And remember, we said the reason that it needed to bend where the double bond was due to an imbalance of hydrogens. We no longer have an imbalance. So even though this structure has a double bond, it actually will not bend. So what this structure is, where we have an unsaturated fat, where there is a double bond, but it is not bending, that is what we call a trans fat. So again, just to recap, when we hydrogenate, we are adding hydrogens into a food product. It will fill up some of the gaps where hydrogens were missing, but what it will also do is the places that didn't get to receive hydrogen, it will shift the places of those hydrogens. And when it does that, and we have one missing from the top, one missing from the bottom, it balances out the hydrogens, and that causes the structure to no longer need to bend, even though there is a double bond present. So this is not going to bend at all. It's going to stack tightly, just like a saturated fat would. And that's all that the food manufacturers care about. They just want to eliminate those gaps. They want it to stack tightly like a saturated fat so that we no longer have those gaps that will make it spoil more quickly. So this is going to be the result of hydrogenation, is a fat that is technically unsaturated. It has double bonds, but it does not bend, so it actually looks and acts like a saturated fat instead. So hydrogenation is what creates trans fats. Now this over here is just showing us the same thing, just in a different form. So the picture on the left is what a normal unsaturated fat looks like. You see that the place where we have a double bond, they're showing us that the hydrogens that are missing are both missing from the bottom. That creates an imbalance and causes the structure to bend. After we hydrogenate, it caused one of the hydrogens to move to the bottom instead. And so you see on the right now, we have a structure that still has a double bond, but it's no longer bent because we have moved one hydrogen to the other side and balanced out those hydrogens. And so on the left, we have just a normal unsaturated fat where the double bond causes a kink. On the right, we have an unsaturated fat that is now technically trans because it is no longer bending, even though it does have a double bond.